Hello and welcome to our 2020 IHI National Forum Keynote with Dr. Donald Berwick. This keynote is supported by Vizient as a reflection of their commitment to improvement in healthcare. Thank you. Supporters have no influence on the development or delivery of session content. Now, please join me in welcoming President and CEO of IHI, Kedar Mate.
Well, welcome back to the final keynote of the 2020 IHI Forum. We hope that you have enjoyed the program so far and have taken away new ideas and inspiration from the many faculty and speakers who have shared their work and their ideas with you. We hope that you will come back to the forum site over the next few days to listen to sessions you couldn't attend, download session materials, and visit the storyboards and our sponsors and exhibitors. 2 days ago, I had the privilege of joining the virtual graduation ceremony for the 2019-2020 class of IHI Fellows. Every year, IHI selects a cohort of professionals from all over the world to join a prestigious fellowship in quality and safety. These fellows work together and practice the IHI philosophy of all teach, all learn. Everyone has something to teach and everyone has something to learn. This year's group of 21 leaders hailed from 14 countries, and they have big plans for how healthcare needs to change and just how each of them will be instrumental in bringing about that change. We congratulate them on their graduation. Today, we are joined on this virtual keynote stage by none other than the author of IHI's All Teach, All Learn philosophy, my friend, mentor, and guide, Dr. Donald Berwick. About a month ago, Don introduced Tony Fauci to a global audience, describing Dr. Fauci as a modern superhero, a hero that the world so desperately needs during these increasingly troubled times. As I read Don's words about Dr. Fauci, I couldn't help but think that the text applied as much to the author, Don, as they did to Tony. For in times when we have collectively despaired about the state of health in this country and beyond, when we have sought moral clarity in the fog of uncertainty, and when we have needed a voice of reason and principle in the midst of relativism and confusion, we have so often turned to one voice to help us collectively navigate and get our bearings. That voice, the one you are about to hear, belongs to Dr. Donald Berwick. Don is, of course, a president emeritus and senior fellow at the Institute for Healthcare Improvement. Prior to this, Don served as the administrator for the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services under President Obama. And as a pediatrician, Don has served on the faculty of Harvard Medical School and the Harvard School of Public Health. Don has served on almost every distinguished healthcare panel and committee that there is in this nation and has received many awards for his service to the improvement of health and healthcare worldwide. Thank you for being here, and thanks for all you do to improve health and healthcare around the world every day. And thank you also to our sponsor, Vizient Incorporated, for their sponsorship of this keynote. It is now my great privilege to welcome to this virtual stage, Dr. Donald Berwick.
Kedar, thank you so much. Thanks for your leadership of IHI, and a special shout out to the IHI team who've made this forum a magnificent event, despite all of the barriers that the pandemic is forcing us to face. It's more important than ever to be together, and it's a privilege to get to join you. On the morning of November 9th, 2016, Paula Green woke up in her hometown, Leverett, Massachusetts, to find that Donald Trump was the newly elected president of the United States. Paula is in the town of Leverett, which is deeply blue politically. 79% of the votes had gone for Hillary Clinton. Paula was shaken, and she wondered, how could this have happened in her country? 836 miles from Leverett, Massachusetts, is Letcher County, Kentucky, and there Gwen Johnson awoke to the same news that morning, but with very different emotions. Gwen wasn't in love with everything Trump represented, to say the least, but in a region of fourth-generation coal miners, proud of their heritage in an era of the closing of the mines, Gwen had seen Letcher County's economy take a nosedive. It was in shambles. Trump seemed to offer what they were looking for, something different. In Gwen's county, 79.8% of the people voted for Trump. We're going to hear more about Gwen and Paula later this afternoon. In fact, you're going to hear from them. They're here with me. They're both amazing leaders, but they are in a polarized country and they live at two poles. Some of you may know that in 2013, 2014, I made a foray into politics. I ran for the nomination for governor of Massachusetts. I didn't win, but in my 605 days of campaigning, I had some of the most inspirational experiences of my whole life. I visited about 185 of Massachusetts' 351 towns, many of them more than once. Remarkably, in all that time, I didn't hear much about polarities. People didn't talk about other people. They talked about their worries, the worries that they shared, the dreams that they shared. Will the fisheries in Gloucester survive? What could be done about the opioid epidemic raging in Fall River or in Wellesley? A Roxbury mother told me about rats on the floor and no heat in her son's elementary school. These people, they were asking to be noticed. They were asking to be remembered. They kept saying, "Don't forget us." That's what I heard from a group in rural Western Massachusetts. I heard it from Black ministers gathered in a Roxbury basement in Boston. I heard it from a depressed and very frightened transgender woman. A 20-year-old boy who just gotten out of prison. I remember he said to me, "Please say my name on TV. Please say my name on TV." Rather than polarity, what I heard more commonly was what I experienced in the beautiful seaside town of Ipswich, Massachusetts, at a morning meeting. The meeting began with a testimonial to a local project. They've been unable to find the money in the school budget to make the playground in the Winthrop Elementary School fully accessible. The town had organized instead a weekend volunteer construction event. Local business people donated supplies, and on Saturday morning, 500 volunteers, 500 people showed up out of a town population of only 12,000 to build a playground. The work went on for 2 straight days under Klieg lights overnight, and on Sunday, the playground was done. I remember that Finn Hackett, he was a 4th grader at the elementary school. He gave a little speech of celebration. What Finn said was, "I wish everybody was as lucky as I am to live in a place where so many people help." But overall, of course, neither the world nor our country feels very close to Finn Hackett's dream. Solidarity like that seems very hard to find nowadays. We see many more fractures than bridges, and the signs, they litter the front pages of every morning newspaper. This is a graphic depiction of polarization in our Congress. These are voting patterns in the US House of Representatives from 1949 to 2011. This is hyperpolarization. 2 islands of left wing and right wing, they're drifting farther and farther apart. Nate Silver of 538 had analyzed what would have happened in the 2016 election if only women had voted, or if only men had voted. These were the predictions for the 2018 midterm election in the US House. If only men had voted, if only women had voted, only college-educated whites, only whites without college, or only people of color. In our Congress, according to USC professor James Lowe, party polarization in this country is the most extreme since the Civil War. There's economic polarization also. This is from the Pew Research Center. These are trends in income and wealth for the upper, middle, and lower third of income Americans between 1983 and 2016. In fact, in this country, we have the highest level of income inequality in all of the G7 nations. The polarity of economic well-being, it plays out right here in the healthcare workforce. As you've seen, there are more than 1.4 million healthcare workers in this country who do not have health insurance at all. The average income of an American health aide is the same virtually as the federal poverty level for a family of 4. The economic and political polarization is very striking. Even more striking is the emotional polarization. Duke University has a polarization lab. It's headed by this guy, Professor Chris Bale. In a recent article in the journal Science, Boyle and his colleagues explore the progressive emotional distancing in our country along political lines. These people distinguish between what they call ideological polarization, we disagree on issues, and affective polarization. We don't like each other. We even hate each other. And over 40 years, affective polarization has grown steadily, which is to say that bad feelings, even hatred toward people of the opposing party, is now stronger than affection toward people of the same party. We hate our political opponents more than we love our political allies. The Duke researchers think that this othering, this aversion, this moralization, they call it, is a fundamental threat to our social fabric, to our democracy. And of course, it's played out in the COVID pandemic, as even the wearing of masks and social distancing have become objects of political discord with horrific implications for the health of the public, making this dark time even darker. So what does this have to do with improvement? Because after all, improvement is the mission that unites us, not just in this forum, but in all of the work of IHI and many of you back in your organizations. It has a lot to do with improvement, and I want to explain. Not one single day passes without my thinking of Tom Nolan, my valued mentor. Tom died far too young, a year ago last March, and I miss him every day. Tom shaped more of IHI's intellectual foundation than any other single person in our history. Tom and his colleagues in Associates in Process Improvement wrote the best textbook of improvement science and practice that I know. It's the Improvement Guide, shown here. Appendix A in the Improvement Guide is a gold mine. It's a collection of very strong design ideas. They're change concepts from which anyone can draw as they construct tests of change. Appendix A in the Improvement Guide, all 51 pages of that book's second edition. I think it's the most valuable written resource for improvement that I've ever encountered. The second edition has 72 change concepts. Change concept number 1 is eliminate things that are not used. Change concept number 72 is manage uncertainty, not tasks. This line of design principles reminds me a little bit of the so-called Lojong Teachings or Lojong Slogans. They're mind training techniques from Tibetan Buddhism. There are 59 Lojong Teachings. These are daily lessons that you can meditate upon, you can work with. In the version I have, Lojong number 1 is first train in the preliminaries, but my favorite is the last one, number 59. It's don't expect applause. Worth meditating on. Anyway, I asked Tom once what he thought was the most powerful of all the change concepts, and he didn't miss a beat. He immediately said cooperate. That concept, cooperating, it actually appears more than once in the Improvement Guide's Appendix A. For example, change concept number 20 is consider people to be in the same system, which they explain this way. They say people in systems are usually working toward different purposes. They're all trying to optimize their own system. Taking actions that help people think of themselves as part of the same system can give them a common purpose and constitute a basis for optimizing the larger system. Change concept 37 is develop alliances and cooperative relationships. This is actually more subtle, and I won't get into the details, but basically they don't like restructuring. They don't think mergers and acquisitions and consolidation add much to the well-being of consumers. They say various types of alliances based on the principle of cooperation to optimize interactions between parts of the system offer a better approach for integration of organizations. They say focus not on structures, focus on behaviors. Bland Godfrey once told me a story about visiting a Japanese automobile manufacturer where the accounts payable department was tiny, just 1 or 2 people. A U.S. automobile plant would have had a department with scores of people in accounts payable. And Bland asked them, well, how is this possible? And they said, well, we'll give you an example. They bought windshields from a vendor. Every month, they counted the number of cars they made. They added in the number of windshields they'd broken during assembly, and then they sent the vendor a check for that many windshields. No invoice, no paperwork. That was it. I'm going to put this simpler. Many problems that we face, many goals that we have, they cannot be solved, they cannot be achieved without working together across boundaries. The problems are much bigger than our parts. They're bigger than our departments. They're bigger than our tribes. The solutions have to be bigger than the problems. Once I visited a famous teaching hospital, and I met with the nurses in the pediatric intensive care unit. With the pediatric intensive care unit served as the post-operative care unit for kids as well. And I said, well, what were you working on? What were you trying to improve? And they said, well, the problem's the operating room. This is a general hospital, and when the operating room operates on a kid, they always use adult IV equipment, adult tubing, adult burettes, adult fluid bags. And when the kid gets here, every single time we have to switch everything over to pediatric sizes. That can take an hour. So I said to them, well, what do the OR staff say when you talk to them about that? And they answered with totally straight faces. They were not joking. The PICU nurses said, talk with them. We don't talk with them. Improving health and healthcare in a hospital is tough. You have to learn to cross boundaries, to redesign shared systems, to tear down walls, to cooperate. Without that, you're cooked. Improving health and healthcare in a nation is even tougher. The boundaries are thicker, the walls are higher, the emotional ties for cooperation are more frayed. If we ever want to improve the social determinants of health, and we must, like food security and housing security and transportation and recreation and criminal justice and poverty and racism, the things you've been hearing about in this forum, the need for cooperation is infinitely greater, and so is the damage of fragmentation. Unless we come together, who is going to be responsible for seeing that every American family has food or a decent home or green spaces for play, that every kid is not afraid, that every person who's headed for jail or prison has a route back to health and to compassion? Who's going to end poverty in this wealthy nation? Who's going to make healthcare a human right? These problems, these goals, they are much, much bigger than our fragments. In his farewell address, George Washington famously warned about the ultimate threat of factionalism. He said, the alternate domination of one faction over another, sharpened by the spirit of revenge, is itself a frightful despotism. Those maps of red and blue, those images of our dissolution, they can make me feel trapped. And if someone built a wall around my particular tribe, it's like they placed a wall on the wall. These signs that say "Stay home." Outside there be monsters. Be scared. Be angry. Blame them. I guess that's how Paula Green back in Leverett could have felt on November 9th, 2016. But Paula chose not to feel helpless. She likes solving problems. She's a change agent. Paula is a psychologist by training, and for 40 years, her main work has been to try to build understandings between people who see themselves as enemies, people who sometimes even hate each other. She's worked in dozens of countries, most often in the immediate aftermath of armed conflicts. As professor at the School for International Training in Brattleboro, Vermont, Paula founded the CONTACT program there, Conflict Transformation Across Cultures, the CONTACT program, Conflict Transformation Across Cultures, and the Karuna Center for Peace Building, headquartered in Amherst, Massachusetts. Paula is a serious student of the renowned psychologist, Professor Tom Pettigrew, who's the key author of something called intergroup contact theory. The central theory is simple. Contact between people reduces prejudice. No theory in social psychology has more consistent experimental support than intergroup contact theory. In over 500 experiments on social contact, 94% of the studies found a negative correlation between intergroup contact and prejudice. More contact, less prejudice. 58 countries have been studied, I think, and it's true in every single one of them. The more intense the contact, the more successful the outcome. And that opens a story I want you to hear. I want you to hear it from two of its authors themselves, Gwen Johnson and Paula Green. It's the story of Hands Across the Hills, and it's far better to hear it from them. So let me introduce Gwen Johnson and Paula Green. You'll turn your cameras on and your microphones on, please. I already said a few words about Paula. So Gwen, let's start with you. Welcome. I'm so glad you're joining us.
Thank you.
Could you just say a few words, just introduce yourself and your community to us, please?
I'm sitting in kind of the community center in the kitchen of Black Sheep Bakery at a Hemp Hill Community Center. We're a social enterprise, and we are situated in a coal camp community that was built over 100 years ago to house miners and to produce coal for the Industrial Revolution.
Say another word about Leverett. What's it like, Leverett County? What is it like for you?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry. We were expecting, when we leave rural Kentucky, we think everything's a city. And so we were expecting Leverett, Massachusetts to be a city. And we rolled in about 10:30 at night to this quaint, just really quaint New England village with a town hall and a church. And we were ever so impressed that we were in hill country instead of flatland city.
So Paula, you started that. Tell us how that happened. What's the origin story here?
Well, it was quite amazing. And what happened was we were mystified and rattled by the election results. And as a result, a bunch of us in town got together and we formed a committee. What we wanted to do was to learn about people who voted for Trump and who they were and why they voted and build our understanding. And we looked locally. Nobody wanted to talk to us. It was just after the election and they didn't want to be scolded by a bunch of liberals. So we project went on hold, and then one of our members found an online article written by a guy named Ben Fink, who's from Connecticut, but was doing community organizing in eastern Kentucky in the coal fields, very close to Gwen. And we spoke to him, emailed back and forth, did exchanges. And one lesson learned was you need somebody like that to get a project going because outsiders are not trusted. So we got started with this project. And because I had been working overseas for decades, doing dialogue with all kinds of difficulties and working at SIT, bringing war people, war victims and survivors in, the group asked me to lead this up. So I began to figure out what to do. And there we were, getting launched.
So that began Hands Across the Hills. So Gwen, what did you think when you got this outreach from Paula and her friends in Leverett, Massachusetts?
Well, I was very suspicious. I thought that it was probably another Save the Dumb Hillbillies effort. And we've had decades of that. And we've also had decades of exploitation from media projects and news projects who come and show the worst of the worst and what we call poverty porn. And so we were a little bit apprehensive and just worried that it'd be more of the same. And so email was drafted and vetted among our group to make sure everything was agreeable, because we have people on both sides of the aisle on our group, which is the Letcher County Culture Hub, is what we call it. And so after the email was drafted and everyone agreed that it could be sent, we sent it to see what would happen.
Tell us a bit more about Letcher County. So bring us there for a second. What's it like there?
So I always say that there's an invisible divide between Hemp Hill and Neon, which is the nearest little town to us, and the county seat. The county seat is where the doctors and the lawyers and all those folks live. And the working class people live up on our end of the county, you know, and the children. I mean, I'm a child of a dirty coal miner is kind of the prevailing attitude. And so we had the silk stocking section, and I'm from the cotton stocking section back in the early days. So that's kind of still the prevailing attitudes.
Paula, so you reached out to these people in Letcher. They were a little suspicious. What was your step? What were your goals, and how did you structure this?
Well, we didn't know they were suspicious, of course. That was a big surprise to us. We learned a lot about that. But we knew we were very different. We live in a college town, a college area, and it's very different environments. So we had a lot of bridging to do with each other. My biggest goal was to get the right design to make it possible to have an environment where people would really be able to talk to each other. And we wanted people to stretch and broaden ourselves, and we wanted to have lasting and far-reaching impact. And we had to figure out a way that we could build the muscle to listen to people whose lives and perspectives were so different than our own. And so that we could see each other as full people, because the media was full of cardboard stereotypes, absolute lies. We committed ourselves, importantly, to absolutely not convince, cajole, criticize anybody for how they voted or who they are, which is the opposite of dialogue. And to avoid those temptations does require some discipline, which we built into the process. Part of the process was everybody on both sides, either from me or from Ben in Kentucky, had dialogue training in advance. So we came already with some understanding of what happens. And we decided on 3-day residential workshops, dialogues, because I know that time, longevity matters. We devised all sorts of cultural activities like art and music and dance and drama and potlucks to make sure that people were learning in other ways besides sitting in these formal dialogue circles.
So you actually had the people from Kentucky came to Amherst to Leverett.
They came and they stayed in our homes. And that was scary for everybody. But, there's so much intimacy hanging out at the kitchen table and drinking coffee in your bathrobe. And what we've seen is that some of those pairs of host and guest became the strongest pairs in the whole session.
So Gwen, tell us from your point of view. You got in a car and you drove to Massachusetts?
Yeah, we were in a van, and we had all this stuff piled in, and we'd taken some moonshine for gifts, and just tried to take the flavor of our area with us. But there was a lot of apprehension, and we didn't all agree on things within the van. And so, it was a long trip. We left at like 5 a.m. in the morning. We rode in there about 10:30 that night. When you got 11 people in a 15-passenger van with everybody's luggage and all that, it's a pretty hard trip, but we made it.
And you stayed in the homes of your new acquaintances.
Yes.
Paula, and we'll watch this happen, Paula. The people from Letcher arrived in Leverett. What are some of the lessons you began to learn? What are some of the outcomes that you began to notice?
Well, the whole thing was a huge responsibility. I did the design, and I worked out what to do on each of the 3 days and how to shape the questions and how to make it work. And when I got worried about this, which I did, of course, because the gulf between us was millions of miles, not just 1,000 miles, I remembered working in Bosnia or Rwanda or Israel and Palestine or any of dozens of other countries where the stakes were so much higher, the conflict so much more brutal and bloody, and yet these astonishing insights emerged for people. And it happened here too. And what happened for us was we remembered that a human being is larger than their vote. That sounds so simple, but it's really easy to forget. And we never get to love people.
So Gwen, what's one memory you have from that encounter? So something that sticks in your mind as a kind of iconic of it.
Well, as hard as we tried, sometimes we offended each other. And we developed this ouch and oops thing that we did. And so when I got really hurt, I said, ouch. I mean, at times I felt wounded. And that was even with all this care being taken, that we didn't offend each other. And then at times I would know I wounded someone the same way, and I would say, oops. And so in doing that, we began to be more aware of our words and of how we received what was being said to us, because neither side intended to wound.
What was a wound? What was an example of a wound?
An example of a wound was at one point I was talking about boom and bust in the coal fields and how it was tied to war many times, and how we would have a boom in war times because the coal was being used to melt the steel to make the implements of war. And I was talking about that, and Paula said, I'm paraphrasing because I can't remember exactly how she said it, but she said something to the effect, and she never intended this to be offensive, but I was wounded by this. She said that she would not want to live in a culture that hoped for war. And I said, oh, we didn't hope for war. We never hoped for war. It was just part of producing coal in a region. So that was probably the most wounded, but I was wounded by that. I don't even know if I ever shared with Paula that she wounded me.
Paula,
but she did.
What's your reaction to that, and how
Well, that's not what I said, of course. That's what you remember that I said, but it's not what I said. And it was the one time that I sort of stepped out of my facilitation role, but I didn't say that. But you heard that, and so I apologize to you because you've been carrying that all these years, and we're close friends now, and I never knew it. So thank you.
I'm over it. I'm totally over it.
Yeah.
So look, Paul and
It's not
Gwen,
quite what I would have said
I
anyway.
wish we had an hour for this conversation, but let's leap ahead and say, well, what does this accomplish now? I mean, you've been at this 3 years, and Leverett has visited Letcher County now, and would have done it again if not for the pandemic right now. So for you, Gwen, what could come of this? What has come of this? What's meaningful to you about it?
These deep friendships. That means so much. I have a hard time talking about it because it makes me cry. The fact, the respectful listening and the care that was taken not to wound, even though there was this vast chasm between us, and between our perspectives. I just think the respect that has been shown by both sides has caused us to develop a deep love. And now, when something happens in the coal fields, one of the first people that I contact is Paula, and I send it to her. And if something wonderful happens, I send it to her. If it's bad, I send it. And so there's this communication that has developed between us till my worldview has been greatly broadened by this collaboration.
So for both of you, does this have implications for our nation? Are you able to think beyond the boundaries of your towns and cities and think about what this could mean for us?
You asking me this time?
Sure, you start, Paul, and then Gwen, I'd love to hear your thought.
Well, one of the things that's happened, I'm an educator at heart, so this is also an educational endeavor for me. And one of the things that happened has been an enormous outpouring of publicity, way beyond the size and scope of this modest project. The Times and the Globe and NPR and the New Yorker and Europe and Asia, and a film made about us in Germany, and it keeps going. And it feels to me like it was a response to the hopelessness in our country. And this little project created a tremendous amount of hope for people here and abroad. And that's generating cycles of its own. So I think keeping hope alive and showing models of people very separated by votes, but very now connected on the interpersonal level, and realizing that we never get done learning how to love and expand our boundaries of care. That's just keep going.
Paula, you're talking now to about 6,000 people, healthcare leaders from many countries, executives, doctors, boards. What's one piece of advice you would give them about how to build on this? What could they do?
Well, I think dialogue is an incredible skill for shifting from silos that we all live in to broader collective vision in our institutions. And it's wonderful for the healthcare to contribute to, I think, smarter growth and wiser development because all the voices are in the room. We're trying to focus on inclusion. My hands are doing that. Nobody being left out. And it's also a wonderful tool for continuing a process because it keeps everyone on board, manages the resistance, and helps people not feel ignored or disempowered and therefore likely to sabotage anything you're trying to do. So if we really believe in sharing power and resources, we need to bring all the voices into the room.
Thank you so much, Paula, for what you do. And Gwen, you get the last word. Talk about hope. What could happen here?
I just think that we've got to start listening to each other. We've got to start listening to the other side of the argument and to know what causes the viewpoint. You know, we've got these climate change and we're sitting smack in the middle of coal country, but we don't have an aversion to science. We know about climate change. We know about carbon emissions. We know all that. But at the end of the day, if you can't feed and clothe the children, what is it that we're working for? So,
and I can't thank you enough. I wish we had an hour more to spend with you, and I hope IHI is going to stay connected to this amazing work. Hands Across the Hills, it changed my life just to read about it. So thank you for your generosity. I wish we had more time. I'm going to close with a few comments, and I hope we're going to stay in touch. Thank you both.
Thank you.
I can only hope that you experience this the way I do, with just a sense of promise and possibility. I have to get back to the screen sharing here. I'm sorry. I don't know if you remember, but at the National Forum in 2017, Brian Stevenson from the Equal Justice Institute spoke to us about the power of proximity. He said, if you're willing to get closer to people who are suffering, you'll find the power to change the world. These people certainly knew that. Father Greg Boyle spoke to us in 2018. He writes, human beings cannot demonize people they know. You put enemies together, say baking bread, and humans can't sustain animosity. It is impossible. I don't know if Greg Boyle or Brian Stevenson are students of intergroup contact theory. I'm sure that George Washington wasn't, but they all seem to have arrived at the same place that I hear from Gwen Johnson and Paula Green. They're tired of polarization. They're hopeful about people. They're saying, let's talk. Can't we talk? Let's bake some bread together. Let's break bread, not lies. I don't know if this really helps. Is it too sappy? Is it naive? Is it out of touch with the state of nature? What I do know as a student of Tom Nolan's, though, is that I'm constantly searching for a change concept, the simple redesign idea that can birth new systems of good, new systems for good people trapped in old systems. And here's one idea: it's proximity, it's breaking bread, it's taking that long drive from Letcher County to Leverett and from Leverett to Letcher County. So I'm going to recommend that we take this very seriously. I propose a year of tests of change based on the search for proximity, based on the baking and breaking of bread. I'd like to propose that every one of us here as individuals, every organization represented in this meeting, take a leaf from the book you just heard, the book of Hands Across the Hills, create an opportunity for social contact between people in your life, in your town, in your state, in your nation. Take the risk of spending some time together. What's the worst that could happen? I guess sparring, insults traded, raised voices, slam doors. We'd retreat to our tribes. And I want to be very clear about one thing. When it comes to ethics, morality, compassion, I will fiercely defend the values that I hold dear. I say no to racism, no to cruelty, no to turning our backs on suffering. But I also sense that maybe most of us share and honor the same values, the values you just heard Paula and Gwen explore, that we want the same things for ourselves and for our neighbors, and that we need to have ways to uncover that fact with each other. Polarization may not reflect us, it may blind us. And the best that could happen would really be wonderful. It would be water for very thirsty souls now. Possibly now where we're trapped in the fragments and can only see each other as cartoon figures, we can build some bridges. Maybe we could bake some good bread together. Gwen Johnson started a bakery in Letcher County. Maybe we could fight the same fight. I'm quite happy to say that Paula Green is willing to help do some coaching with us. If you'd like to try it, she will help. I think IHI will help. I think so will many others. I'm absolutely certain that there will be many others who would come forward to help build social ties. We don't give up on our moral values, but we can open our minds and our hearts to each other. No one can promise that it'll be easy to reach our hands across other hills. It won't be easy, but we can start. I'll offer you two more Lojong teachings that I love. This is teaching number 49. Always meditate on whatever provokes resentment. And even better, Lojong 30. Don't be so predictable. Reach out. I wish you all very well.
Thank you so much, John. That was so inspiring as always, and I know that we're all sending you a big round of virtual applause. Thank you. And a very special thank you to our special guests, Paula Green and Gwen Johnson, for sharing your incredible story. And of course, thank you to you, our participants, for joining us this week. We hope you feel re-energized, motivated, and inspired to go make improvements in healthcare. Next up, we have e-sessions taking place from 3 o'clock to 4 p.m. After that, we have after-hours networking from 4 to 5. And finally, the Innovation Theater from Aseptiscope from 4:15 to 4:45. Please join us in all of these sessions by going back to ihi.org/forum lobby and navigating to the session of your choice. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.